If someone told you that African short-term rentals are a passive income, either they don't know any better or they're simply lying to you to sell you something. Let me tell you, if you run a short-term rental business or an Airbnb business, it's nowhere near a passive income because it's like any other business. You need to stay on top of the game. You need to understand marketing. You need to understand the finances. You need to understand the regulations that change. There's so many moving pieces that connect this short-term rental that if you just sit back and wait for your money to come in, you will definitely never hit the ROI targets that you are anticipating. Because if you still think that just buying property and just sit back, or in the short-term rental space, you could also rent out the property, rent the property and sublet it. If you just do this and think after you furnish it once, you put it online once, the work is done, then I have to say it's a very wrong way of thinking. Because to make this kind of business work, you always need to improve. You always need to learn. You always need to add new amenities. You always need to define new standard operation procedures. You need to train your cleaners, train your people if you don't have anybody who can do this for you to make it really profitable. You know, in some cases it might be just a passive income because, for example, I saw many opportunities in Zanzibar where they were selling your property and then they also take over the management, that you basically don't have to do anything. But in the end of the day, you also miss out on at least half of the profits you could make with that rental property that you have. And therefore, I want to try to break this belief with you now that you are really trying to take this seriously and treat it as a real business and not just a side hustle or something that can just be run passively. Because as I said, you will not reach the maximum of this rental property, of this kind of business, if you just let it sit there and wait for your guests to come in and never optimize anything during the process. So here's the reality of this kind of business as well. As I mentioned, you still have to learn marketing, you have to take care of the finances, you have to take care of regulations, of new documents, of consistent pieces that are moving, you know, like new amenities. You have to optimize the property, you have to optimize the listings. You might also in the long term want to build out their own website for a short-term rental that you're running, or for the short-term rentals that you're running for the properties you have, to attract more customers and not be too dependent on like any of these platforms like Airbnb, Booking.com, or whichever else you're using to get your tenants. But I would say once it's systemized, you can minimize the workload to a very, very low extent. Then it still is not a passive income business, but at least what you can do, you can lower the workload per property, that you can start scaling this business and run multiple properties with a very limited amount of workload. So what happens if you treat this short-term rental business as passive? The first thing is you will not have any standard operational procedures. So this means you will always have to try to put out the fires because you don't have specific things to do for your team, like your cleaner, your property manager, or your co-host, whoever is involved in this kind of business, and they always need to put out fires and you are also always involved in them. Secondly, you can't train your people properly because you just put them there and you think that they will do it to the standards that you are thinking they will do it. But that's also not the case, because people need proper training even if they worked in any establishments before, because you might do things differently, you might have a different eye for detail, you might have very differences in the property that you are setting up and operating as a short-term rental host compared to the other places they worked in. And most importantly, there's also probably then no pricing strategy, because now as a short-term rental host, you know, you have different seasons of the year. You know that some parts of the year they have maybe much higher demand than other low seasons. You need to put in the work already in advance. For example, now is December time, and let's say the units we manage also in Zanzibar is now in the high season, but the low season is coming up as well from March, April, May, because of Ramadan, of the rainy season, and just it's a much lower season. So what can you do? You need to prevent the low season from being very bad, that you at least maintain a certain level of bookings where the competition is sleeping. And this is nothing you do when March is hitting. This is something you already do when a year in advance. You know, you think about it a year in advance. So what you do, you change your pricing, you increase the pricing for the high season, because you don't want to be booked the first one. So there's all these different things you need to pull, you need to do on a consistent basis to just maximize the outcome of your properties. And as a result of not doing all of these things, you will have low occupancy rate, you will have lower profits, you will have lower reviews, and in the end of the day, slowly over time, you will not be getting any bookings anymore, because the platforms or your ways of attracting customers is not helping you, and you have to hustle for every single guest. What I see many hosts, for example, in different African countries do when they try to get their bookings in, or clients, through different agents on the ground, because they are not able to maintain a level of standard that gives them consistent bookings already way far in advance, and this through different various online channels that they are missing out on, and then rely on people on the ground that also, I believe, are not having the same power as the online presence you could create with a properly run Airbnb or short-term rental business. But what happens if you treat it like a real business? You know, like you can, as I mentioned, you can plan all these things in advance. You can plan for the low season, you can plan your pricing strategy, you can keep optimizing your listing that more people are attracted to it. You are getting a consistent amount of better reviews because you're taking care of the guests, because you work on the guest experience. So what is missing in the property, you add these amenities. And you can also add, in the same instance, if you treat it like a business, you can add upsells. So you can add upsells like tours that you could sell. You can add upsells like, even if it's just an airport pickup, if it's just a driver, if it's a different service that you offer to your guests. So that means that your guests are also worth more, because you consistently, first off, bringing and attracting new guests consistently, and then also making them worth more by selling them more things that they would probably need anyways or purchase anyways from somewhere else while staying with you. Another thing that also happens when you treat it like a real business, you also can train your team properly, that you then, for example, if you have now 1 unit or 2 units or 3 units, whatever, wherever you're at right now in your journey, if you have then these units, you train someone who can properly take care of it, because you have all these operational procedures, you have your systems in place, you know what works and what doesn't work, that you then have the right people in place, you can train them in the right way, and then that you can also, means that you can also scale. So you don't have to always stick with 1, 2, 3 properties. You can just start to scale because you know how to make these properties work, and you can just replicate the system. You can then go ahead with the same systems you have built and launch your next properties, because you know it works this way. And maybe you change just the themes of the designs, the design styles, that not all the properties are in the same building, in the same road, with the same design, that you actually have different properties designed at least, but with the same operational structures behind them. So the front end, so what people see, looks different, but the back end, how you run the operations, how you run this business, is always as similar as possible, that you have the least amount of new workload, and you can just copy and paste the systems you have built into this new property. So this means now when you take it serious, you can get higher profits, you have higher occupancy rates, you can make more from the same guests with upsells, you can scale this business, and you have a team that's actually involved and knows how to run this business for you after a while, and you just have to take care of the most important things in the operations. For me, it's a huge difference by just thinking it's a passive business. You know, like I was also, a while back, I also used to look always for passive income opportunities and stuff, but I think for now there's so much you can do while actively working on this business in the beginning and scale this business until you get to the point where you say like, wow, now I have my active income, the time I spend maxed out in terms of profits, in terms of revenue, in terms of what I do with my time, that you can then maybe invest in more passive income opportunities, or just put more people in place that they take over the operations, that you can go ahead again and scale if this is your goal with this short-term rental business here on the African continent. So therefore, it's just a small reminder from my side here that you really take this business seriously, treat it like a real business, because it is. You know, short-term rentals, they are like, it's hospitality, you know. You can't just put it up and just expect it to work, you know, like itself. You know, like if you go to restaurants, if you go to hotels, if you go to other Airbnbs and short-term rental properties that are working well, you will see people changing things on a consistent basis and being involved into the business, you know. If you just put up a hotel, just let it run like the way it is, and never optimize and never change things and never maximize these things, at some point it will not work the way it started anymore. Really try to treat it like a real business. And if this is something you want to do, you want to run your Airbnb and short-term rental business as a real business, want to scale, want to optimize, want to improve, want to make more money with it and have a bigger impact also in the local communities you're running this business in, then I would say the Homebase Africa is the right thing for you. That's what we built this program and community for people who are really taking this business seriously here on the African continent. We just bring together short-term rental hosts on the African continent and help you to optimize and scale your business. If this sounds like you, click the link down below in the description. And for the first 25 people that join before December 31st of 2025 now, we give a one-on-one strategy session away with me and my co-founder, who's also been involved in Airbnb on the African continent for the last 6 years, to help you optimize your business and run quicker, get quick results, and then that you can go ahead and just scale this the way you want to scale it. So I appreciate you. I see you there. Otherwise, I hope I gave you some value. I walk you up, and I see you in the next videos.